Welcome back to our channel, your ultimate destination for the most riveting and scandalous updates from the world of daytime drama. Today is a magnificent day to delve into the explosive secrets and shattered vows currently threatening to tear the Forrester and Finnegan families apart forever. Let us dive straight into the heart-wrenching drama unfolding in Los Angeles. The morning light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Forrester Creations CEO office usually brings a sense of absolute power and enduring legacy to Steffy Forrester Finnegan. However, on this fateful morning, the piercing rays of the California sun serve only as a harsh, unforgiving spotlight on the most catastrophic mistake of her entire life. As consciousness slowly returns, fighting through the thick, throbbing haze of a severe alcohol-induced hangover, Steffy's senses are bombarded by a reality she cannot immediately comprehend. The cold leather of the executive sofa against her bare skin sends a violent, terrifying shiver down her spine. The crushing realization that she is completely naked, stripped of her designer clothes and her marital dignity, hits her with the devastating force of a freight train. But the true horror is not just her physical state. It is the sight of the man sleeping soundly beside her. It is not her husband, John Finnegan. It is Carter Walton, the company's chief operating officer and one of her most trusted confidants. The suffocating weight of the betrayal immediately seizes Steffy, stealing the breath from her lungs and plunging her into a state of absolute panic. This is the very office where she has commanded empires, made ruthless business decisions, and fiercely defended her family's pristine legacy. Now, it has been irrevocably transformed into the epicenter of her ultimate moral failure. Her mind races at a frantic pace, desperately trying to piece together the fragmented, blurry memories of the previous night. She remembers the blinding fury on the beach in Monaco, the agonizing discovery that Finn had deliberately hidden Sheila Carter's terrifying presence on his commercial flight, and the dramatic, heartbreaking moment she hurled her wedding ring at his chest. She remembers fleeing across the Atlantic Ocean, seeking to drown her trauma, her resurfacing PTSD, and her profound sense of betrayal in glass after glass of premium liquor. She had sought refuge in the one place she felt entirely in control, her corporate sanctuary, only to find Carter Walton there, equally devastated and heavily intoxicated. Carter had been mourning the sudden, agonizing departure of his wife, Daphne Rose Walton, who had fled to Paris after receiving a severe infertility diagnosis. What began as two shattered souls seeking solace in shared grief and the numbing embrace of alcohol rapidly devolved into a disastrous crossing of the ultimate boundary. As Steffy scrambles frantically to gather her discarded clothing scattered across the luxurious executive carpet, her hands tremble uncontrollably with the weight of her sins. The glaring hypocrisy of her situation is a bitter, jagged pill to swallow. For months, she has relentlessly berated Finn for his perceived lack of absolute loyalty and his failure to protect their family's sanctuary from the looming threat of his biological mother. Steffy had claimed the absolute moral high ground, acting as the fierce, uncompromising protector of the Finnegan family peace. Yet, in a single night of drunken vulnerability and emotional chaos, she has committed an act of infidelity so profound that it entirely dwarfs Finn's misguided secrecy. She has shattered her marital vows in the most visceral, unforgivable way possible. As she struggles to button her silk blouse with shaking fingers, Carter begins to stir on the sofa. The heavy groan that escapes his lips as he wakes is laden with the exact same intoxicating regret that is currently drowning Steffy. When his eyes finally open and meet hers, the silence that falls between them is deafening. It is a thick, radioactive silence, heavy with the apocalyptic fallout of their indiscretion. Carter, a man who has always prided himself on his steadfast integrity, looks utterly broken and completely lost. Carter sits up, the horrifying reality of their nakedness and their location crashing down upon his conscience. He had been drowning in the agonizing grief of Daphne's medical crisis, believing his dreams of fatherhood were permanently shattered. In his absolute lowest moment, he sought comfort in a dear friend, only to destroy the very foundation of his moral compass. Panic, raw and unadulterated, seizes Steffi's features as she watches the realization wash over Carter's face. She cannot allow this single, catastrophic night to define her, nor can she allow it to destroy the beautiful life she has fought so relentlessly to build with Finn and their children. She lunges toward Carter, her voice a frantic, desperate whisper that echoes ominously off the walls of the CEO office. She looks him dead in the eye, her expression a mask of pure terror. "This didn't happen, Carter. You have to swear to me, right here, right now, that this never happened," Steffi pleads, her voice cracking under the immense pressure of the moment. She knows that if the truth of this night ever sees the light of day, it will not just end her marriage to Finn. It will detonate a massive bomb within the Forrester family. It would destroy her pristine reputation, her unshakable authority at the company, and her standing as a devoted mother. She is fighting a desperate battle for her survival, and she desperately needs Carter to be her silent accomplice in the greatest, most deceptive cover-up of her entire life. Steffi launches into a frantic, breathless rationalization, desperately trying to strip the intimate encounter of any genuine emotional weight or romantic significance. It was the alcohol, Carter, Steffi insists, her voice trembling with the monumental effort to convince both him and herself of this fragile narrative. It was the liquor, the overwhelming stress, the absolute trauma of dealing with Sheila Carter's psychotic presence once again. I was completely out of my mind with grief and anger over Finn's massive betrayal in Monaco. You were hurting so deeply over Daphne leaving for Paris. We were just a broken, devastated people who made a horrific, completely meaningless mistake. She frames the night not as a manifestation of hidden desires or a genuine romantic connection, but as a tragic, isolated symptom of their respective traumas. She needs Carter to believe that their physical intimacy was entirely devoid of emotional truth, a mere biological reaction to overwhelming psychological pain. Carter listens intently to Steffi's desperate justifications, his own mind a chaotic, agonizing whirlwind of guilt and profound self-loathing. He knows she is right about the blinding effects of the alcohol and the suffocating weight of their shared grief, but the harsh reality of the betrayal remains entirely unchanged. He has slept with his powerful boss, the daughter of his best friend Ridge Forrester, and a married woman who is supposed to be committed to another man. Furthermore, the agonizing irony of his situation is about to be compounded by a cruel twist of fate he could never have anticipated in his wildest dreams. Unbeknownst to Carter in this exact, agonizing moment, Daphne has realized the profound error of her ways. Having reached Paris, the physical distance only clarified her immense love for Carter, prompting her to turn right back around to fight for their marriage. The impending, unexpected return of his wife adds a suffocating, unbearable layer of urgency to Carter's internal torment. He is a man who deeply, truly loves his wife, a man who was utterly devastated by her departure just hours prior. Now, he is faced with the horrifying reality that he has committed the ultimate marital betrayal just as his wife is preparing to return and fight for their shared future. The immense guilt threatens to consume his soul entirely. He looks at Steffi, seeing the sheer, unadulterated terror in her eyes, and realizes that a confession would not cleanse his conscience. It would only obliterate multiple innocent lives. A confession would destroy Daphne, who is already incredibly fragile from her devastating medical diagnosis, and it would completely annihilate the Finnegan family. With a heavy, reluctant nod, Carter finally agrees to Steffi's desperate, pleading terms. "Nobody can ever know, Steffi. We take this horrific secret to our graves," he vows, his voice thick with profound remorse and sorrow. They forge a dark, binding pact in the morning light of the CEO office, swearing absolute secrecy to protect. their lucrative careers, their unblemished reputations, and the fragile remnants of their respective marriages. They scramble frantically to erase any physical evidence of their encounter, their movements hurried, paranoid, and filled with shame. The sudden, terrifying sound of the cleanup crew approaching the executive suite nearly sends both Steffy and Carter into sudden cardiac arrest. But they manage to evade detection by the narrowest of margins, forever tethered by the invisible chain of their shared sign. Steffy returns to the Cliff House, her beautiful sanctuary overlooking the Pacific Ocean, but it no longer feels like a safe haven. It feels like an active crime scene where she is the primary, guilty suspect. She is immediately confronted by the piercing, analytical gaze of her mother, Taylor Hayes. Taylor's sharp psychiatric intuition flares instantly. She senses the profound, unspoken devastation radiating from her daughter's rigid posture. Steffy breaks down in front of Taylor, confessing that her marriage is over due to Finn's massive betrayal regarding Sheila's presence in Monaco. She unleashes her fury about Finn's dangerous lies, playing the role of the wronged, traumatized wife to absolute perfection. Yet, beneath the righteous indignation and the flowing tears, Steffy is deliberately omitting the most crucial, damning detail of her timeline, her passionate night with Carter Walton. The arrival of Finn at the Cliff House elevates the emotional stakes to unbearable, suffocating heights. Finn has raced back to Los Angeles on a commercial flight, consumed by sheer panic and overwhelming guilt over his massive mistake. He stands before Steffy, a desperate, remorseful husband begging for a shred of forgiveness. Finn launches into a passionate, tearful apology, admitting his severe lack of respect in hiding Sheila's terrifying presence on his flight. He pleads for a second chance, swearing his absolute, unwavering loyalty to Steffy and their family, completely unaware that the woman he is begging has just committed a betrayal far more severe than his own. Watching Finn grovel and plead, Steffy is hit with a sickening, overwhelming wave of hypocrisy. She listens to his desperate promises to banish Sheila forever, watching the raw desperation in his eyes, and makes a calculated, chilling decision. She will use Finn's immense guilt to completely mask her own unforgivable sins. She hypocritically deflects all the blame onto him, maintaining her rigid stance of righteous anger. By accepting Finn's desperate apology and focusing the narrative entirely on his failure regarding Sheila, Steffy effectively buries her infidelity under the deceptive guise of marital reconciliation. It is a masterful, albeit deeply toxic, psychological manipulation designed to ensure her dark secret remains hidden in the shadows forever. However, secrets of this massive magnitude refuse to remain buried, especially when the co-conspirators are forced to interact daily. The aftermath at Forrester Creations is a dangerous psychological minefield. Every single time Steffy and Carter are in the same room, the atmosphere becomes thick, heavy, and completely unbreathable. The executive boardroom is now a pressure cooker of unspoken guilt. They attempt to maintain a flawless facade of professional normalcy, discussing quarterly projections and marketing strategies with the team, but every shared glance is loaded with radioactive, explosive tension. Carter, usually the steadfast voice of reason and stability at the company, finds himself struggling immensely to maintain his composure. The miraculous return of Daphne has plunged him into a state of constant, agonizing hypervigilance, forcing him to play the devoted husband while suffocating under his own deception. Carter actively avoids Steffy whenever possible, but their high-level executive roles demand constant collaboration, forcing him to continually confront the living, breathing embodiment of his greatest moral failure. For Steffy, the psychological burden is equally crushing and relentless. She is a powerful woman accustomed to absolute control, to dictating the precise terms of her life and her relationships. Now she is held hostage by a dark secret that could detonate her entire world at any given second. The immense strain of maintaining her complex lie begins to manifest in her daily behavior. She becomes increasingly irritable, snapping at loyal employees and micromanaging projects with a frantic, uncharacteristic intensity that leaves her staff bewildered and on edge. The situation reaches its most volatile, dangerous peak whenever Finn visits Forrester Creations. As a devoted, loving husband, Finn frequently drops by the executive office to bring Steffy lunch or simply to check in on her, eager to prove his renewed, unwavering commitment to their fragile marriage. These visits, once a source of immense comfort and joy, are now excruciating, terrifying exercises in deception. When Finn, Steffy, and Carter are forced into the exact same physical space, the unspoken dynamics are utterly suffocating. Carter can barely look Finn in the eye, his immense guilt manifesting as a stiff formality. Steffy wildly overcompensates during these visits, acting overly affectionate and deeply attentive with Finn in a desperate, transparent attempt to project the flawless image of a happily reconciled couple. But John Finnegan is not a fool. As a highly trained, observant physician, he is deeply attuned to subtle shifts in human behavior, body language, and emotional resonance. He slowly begins to notice the strange, almost imperceptible distance in his wife. He notices the subtle way she flinches slightly when he touches her unexpectedly, the way she carefully avoids holding his gaze for too long, and the artificial, forced cadence of her laughter. At first, Finn attributes this emotional distance to the lingering trauma of the Sheila incident in Monaco, assuming she just needs more time. However, as the tense days turn into agonizing weeks, Finn's sharp husbandly instincts begin to sound a quiet, persistent alarm in the back of his mind. The emotional distance between them does not feel like the slow, natural healing of a wound. It feels like the deliberate, calculated construction of a massive wall. Furthermore, Finn cannot help but notice the bizarre, palpable tension between Steffy and Carter Walton. He observes the way their conversations abruptly halt when he enters the room, the strained, overly professional tone they adopt with one another, and the distinct lack of the easy, friendly camaraderie they once shared for years. The pieces of the puzzle simply do not fit together, and Finn's analytical mind cannot simply ignore the glaring discrepancies staring him in the face. The psychological pressure mounting within the glass walls of Forrester Creations is entirely unsustainable, threatening to shatter everything they hold dear. Steffy and Carter are hopelessly trapped in a self-made, inescapable prison of deception, their every interaction a dangerous high-wire act over an abyss of total destruction. The desperate vow of silence they swore in the CEO office is not a protective shield. It is a ticking time bomb waiting to decimate their lives. The longer they suppress the dark truth, the more explosive the inevitable revelation will be. Steffy's desperate attempt to rationalize the night as a meaningless, alcohol-fueled mistake cannot erase the profound, devastating breach of trust she has committed against the man she claims to love. The countdown to absolute destruction has officially begun, and no amount of corporate power or desperate pleading can stop the impending explosion.